Ladies and gents, thanks for your patience. And we are running 4 minutes late. Apologies for that. I'll take the hit. But let's officially kick off the GIC week 7. So this week, we all know what we're going to discuss about. But before that, I want to run through some things, a quick announcements. There's an ongoing recording going on in our Imaginarium suite. So if you're going to grab a slice of pizza, grab it and come back quickly. Don't hang around there. And as you're all aware of the WhatsApp community, I talk in every week and out. So I will try to ask John and Rona if they could politely join. If they can join, they will be at some point, in and out. So if you have any burning questions, do ask them. Do take the opportunity to ask and engage with a lot of people there. For example, Sam's here, one of our founders. He is active and he's been speaking to people and he got some help for some prototype development and product development. So just engage. And pitch form is out and about. We are 2 weeks away from the pitch deadline. So scan the QR code and submit your 90-second elevator style pitch and an optional one-pager. And as I always do, if you've got any questions, for especially this week, we are trying our best to avoid the spatial echo and feedbacks and all the background noises, because we will be having a panel session here. So for in-person audience, please ask away your questions as loud as possible. For online folks, please scan the QR code and start populating your question now. That might steer the conversation of this panel this afternoon. And a quick teaser for the next session, startup finance and IP essentials. So before we head into today's session, I thought it's accurate for me and absolutely necessary to know about the essentials of finance and IP if you wanted to present to any founders or any investors. So please come on in for next week. That is our penultimate session before we head off to pitch. So without further ado, I would like to now invite Rona and John. They collectively have 50 to 60 years plus experience, not only at Diageo, but in various vectors, so be it supply chain, apologies for showing the age, and also from product development. And their MO is not only listening to the pitch, but also how to place a pitch. So I thought these two people are the best to handle the pitch session today. On top of that, Rona will lead the panel session and steer them. So we got a wonderful set of panelists here. So we got Nicola from Scottish Enterprise, and we got Max Winburn from 2T Sensors, and we got Paul Wilson from Stack, and we got Maggie from Rapisense. So without further ado, I'm going to ask now Rona and John to take it forward. Please give them a big round of applause.
Thanks, Rafi, and thank you all so much for joining us today. I didn't realise I was going to be competing with the smell of pizza, so I'm wondering how quickly we can get through this session. But thank you all for joining us today. We're really excited to be with you. We'll talk to you a little bit in a minute about how we came to today, but really excited to be here in terms of talking to you about pitching like a pro. As Rafi says, you are 2 weeks away from the sharp end, right, of being able to make your idea a reality and pitching for whatever it is that you need, whether resources, sponsorship, funding, to bring that to reality. So, you know, we're hoping that today will spark some thoughts about how you might go about pitching for that. So both John and I are here. We work for a company called Diageo. If you're not familiar with Diageo, we're a premium drinks business. We have about 200 premium drinks brands, and we have sales in about 180 different markets worldwide. We have some iconic brands in there: Johnnie Walker Scotch whisky, Guinness beer, Bailey's liqueurs, Tanqueray gin, Don Julio tequila, just to name a few of them. As head of innovation and brand change for Scotch, I have the absolute joy of kind of being a bit of an ambassador for Scotland, right? I work with a very talented team of blenders and master blenders, putting together delicious Scotch liquids that the world can enjoy, and a very talented team of project managers who bring that to fruition, bring the new product development to life, and are able to share just a little bit of Scotland with the whole world. So that is what I do. I'll let John introduce himself.
Hi everyone, yeah, thanks Rona. So I've been with Diageo just about as long as Rona, and we'll not mention numbers, will we? But worked in a number of different roles, and I'm doing a bit of a pitch to you all later, so I'll not say too much, but most of those years have been spent in the supply chain in various roles. And more recently, I've been working as the head of Diageo Sustainable Solutions, which is an open innovation programme that we're using to help identify technologies that will help our business become more sustainable going forward.
Fabulous. So in my 31 years with the business, I've heard a lot of pitches in my time from marketing agencies, from design agencies, from suppliers, and I've certainly made my own fair share of pitches to win resource funding sponsorship for my own projects. So today we're going to introduce you to the Say Snap model for an awesome pitch. And hopefully by the end of today, you'll feel confident that by the time you say snap, you will be able to secure your funding. After that, we're going to watch a very short video by an absolute pro, and John will explain why we picked this particular video. It also covers up for the fact that we'll be setting up for the panel discussion as well, and we have brought together a great group of panellists for you today that involve both investors and entrepreneurs to share their experience with you. So what does Say Snap stand for? So starting off with storytelling. You want to engage your audience, you want to bring them on a journey with you. And storytelling allows you to do that by actually engaging the limbic brain. You want to connect with people emotionally, and that also helps drive the decision making. So that's the first one we're going to start with. Then we're going to think about our audience, shaping that story according to the people we are pitching to. The pitch that you make will be very different if you're talking to a philanthropist. Must be a better word to use for today. But if you're pitching to someone in that area versus capital investor, the pitch will be very different and you want to tailor it accordingly. The next one is to think about you. I am sure that you're selling not just your idea, but how investable you are, right? So you want to think about how you bring across characteristics that will make people want to invest in you, not just your idea. You'll want to highlight the strengths of your idea. You'll also want to acknowledge that there are some gaps, right? Because that's what you're looking for. You're looking for help in terms of addressing some of those gaps as well. Numbers will no doubt be part of your pitch, whether it's market potential, share growth, profitability. Numbers will be an important part of that. And we'll talk more about how we make those numbers more relatable, more memorable, more accessible for your audience. If you got all of that right, you might just make it through to the part where you get to ask something of your investor, right? And it's important that you think about that ask, not just of today, but what you're looking for over the weeks and months ahead as well. And finally, the place and time of your pitch will be important. Now, 2 weeks' time, you're going to be pitching a 90-second pitch, right? You are going to have to be absolutely on point, absolutely nail that brief, be so slick in terms of what you're going to present. That's giving away something, right? You're going to have to be so slick in terms of what you present. You will have the opportunity to do longer pitches, I am sure. And today, that Say Snap model will help you prepare for all of those kinds of pitches. Okay, so let's start off with storytelling. And you might be wondering why we have Sandra Bullock there. So in the movie of my life, we'll have Sandra play me. She's a fabulous actress, right? And obviously Oscar winning. And who doesn't love Sandra Bullock, right? So when I was asked to present today, I thought, what an opportunity. This is fantastic. The chance to give back, the chance to shape young minds, the chance to perhaps influence a great idea able to take flight and by making a great pitch. So I was really excited about doing this. And then very quickly reality crept in where I thought, how have I got time to do this, right? I run a couple of teams for Diageo. I have a family to look after. It was netball season starting. How am I going to have the time to do this? And I thought about enlisting some help here, but getting a co-presenter with John. And in the movie of my life, we'll have Channing Tatum play John, because it's my movie, so why not, right? And we were getting on great guns, right? We were clicking, we were really pulling together all of the material, it was going really well, we were excited about coming to talk to you guys. And then reality bit, right? So one of the entrepreneurs we'd lined up had to go and make a pitch herself today for funding, so she dropped out, and we had scheduling conflicts, and there was the October holidays, and it was all going horribly wrong, and Rafi's going, is the deck ready yet? And I'm thinking, oh God, I'm not sure we're going to make it. But we did, we're here, right? We knew that we had a great message to bring to you guys, that we had great panelists to bring to you guys, and that we had a great audience to talk to today. So I'm delighted to see that we made it, that perseverance paid off, and who knows, maybe Rafi will invite us back for a sequel in the future. But for today, we're here, and let's be in the moment and focus on the message. So that's storytelling, right? We took you on a bit of a journey, we gave you a bit of drama where we were going to make it. We talked a little bit about why I was motivated to come and talk to you guys today, and hopefully you felt that it was relatable and you connected on an emotional level as you've been there yourself in terms of committing to something and then thinking, I have no idea how I'm going to have time to do this. I also dropped in, as you noticed there, you might have noticed, a little bit of Power of Three. I talked about a great message, great panelists, great audience, and we'll talk more about that Power of Three in terms of rhythm as part of the story. We've added some I'm going to say extracurricular at the bottom of some of our slides, where we've found extra material that we thought might be interesting. And if you get a chance, check out Jenny Hoyos' Secret to Telling a Great Story in 60 Seconds or Less. Highly entertaining, right? And definitely something to think about. John, you want to talk about audience?
Sure, yeah. So I think, as we've said, we're going to focus on the 90-second pitch for you guys in a couple of weeks, but there's all sorts of pitch opportunities, and one of the things you really need to get clear on is your audience for that pitch. And we've got some examples up here. So I'll start with the obvious one. So from a corporate perspective, you really need to pitch to them and sell your idea, obviously. But if you want to really understand what they're looking for, they're going to be looking for a solution that doesn't already exist. So you need to make your idea stand out. So the question the corporate person's going to be asking is, how is it different to what's out there before? And is it going to solve the problem that I have? And probably the third thing is it scalable? So the corporate's going to be really looking for the nuts and bolts of how your technology works and how that's going to scale going forward. Whereas, for example, an investor is going to be thinking much more about the return on investment. So from an investment point of view, you've got multiple different types of investor. So you've got, in that space, you could have philanthropic impact investors who will be looking for a roadmap to you bringing your idea to life and having an impact. Whereas you might have a slightly more cutthroat angle on the venture capitalist investor who's looking for payback in a sort of minimum of, well, a maximum of 5 years, really. So you really need to be demonstrating that 2 to 5 year payback, and they'll be all about understanding how you're going to do that. So you really need to think through the different audiences and work out what they're going to be looking for, and then make sure that's like front and center within your pitch. Okay. Good.
All right. So now that you've thought about your audience, you need to think about you, right? And how you're coming across and what it is that you want to convey. I'm going to turn to Paul, who's one of our investors. And just a quick question, Paul, in terms of, you hear an idea, but what are you looking for beyond that idea in terms of it's somebody to invest in?
Well, there's two things. So first thing is that person who is looking for investment, do they have the attributes to invest in to go realize, right, the opportunity? So first of all, are they really obsessed? Are they really focused and fully committed and obsessed and going to give everything to going through that really quite difficult journey of startup, right, to scale up? So, are you believable? Are you committed? Can you influence people? Is really important too. So all this stuff on the storytelling, right, is, you're going to need to influence customers, investors, employees. So are you, influential as a person? The third one, because these days it's highly competitive to get investment and there's so much coaching and storytelling. The third one is, do you know how to pull it off? Do you know the practical steps to go from an idea and take that into market? Do you know the key hires that you need to make? Do you know the technology plan, development plan, right? And do you know potentially the supply chain that you need to position? So one is believable, committed. Two, influential. Three, do you know the practical steps now you're believable and how to do it all?
Thank you so much, Paul. Yeah, so there's a lot to think about beyond just your idea. You're selling yourself. And one of the things that I really found important as I was thinking about today was that idea of starting with why. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with the work of Simon Sinek, right? If you haven't, and you don't have time to read a book, there's lots of YouTube shorts. I think his TED Talk on Start With Why is one of the biggest subscribed TED Talks of all time. But it's well worth a look at some of his work. So let's just hear from Simon.
Sorry, guys.
I guess we weren't sure. Here we go. That's fine. He was so good, let's do it twice, right?
And it changed the course of my life, changed the course of my business. Number one, I learned to start with why, right? So I gave you the example before. I didn't tell people what I do, I tell people what I believe, right? So when you're flying home on the flight, after this event, you'll probably sit next to somebody on a plane and you have plane conversations where somebody turns to you and goes, "What do you do?" And you go, "I'm a chiropractor." And they go, "Cool." And except for the 10% of people who want to talk to a chiropractor, that conversation is over. Because nobody cares about what you do. And by the way, if you said, "What do you do?" and they go, "I'm in marketing," you're going to go, "Cool." Right? So the two things I did. Number one, I stopped talking about what I did and I only started talking about what I believed. Right? You heard the hypothetical example I gave a moment ago. You say, "I love what I do every single day. I help people find ways to live a more inspiring life." Oh my God, how do you do that? Believe it or not, I'm a chiropractor. And then you can talk about you for the next 2 hours if you want, right? So number one was I learned to start with why. I learned to start with what I believe, not what I did.
There you go. And I absolutely understand that, right? I think you're much more engaged when somebody shows that degree of passion, right? When somebody shows it comes from within in terms of the passion and the joy they have in what you do, you're much more inclined to hear what you have to say. And I tried to do that in my introduction today to tell you about how I felt I was a bit of an ambassador for Scotland in terms of the role I did, rather than, well, I'm head of innovation branching for Scotch, right? Which says nothing and doesn't tell you why I go to work, right? So think about how you sell you, right? How you demonstrate that passion and all the key things that Paul talked about, right? Beyond just the idea. John, here?
Sure. So one of the things that is really important when you pitch is to be transparent and authentic. So you really want to bring across who you are. And as Paul said, you're really selling yourself as much as you're selling your idea, your technology. So it's really important that you don't try and pretend to be someone else. You try and be authentic. So you have to be really clear on your strengths and what your technology does and all of the facts and figures, and we'll cover that in a bit more detail. So you really need to know your stuff, basically, but that won't come as a surprise. But when it comes to the gaps, there isn't really a problem with admitting that there's gaps. In fact, in our experience, it's probably better that you acknowledge that you've got some gaps in your plan or your roadmap or even the technology itself. So you want to bring that across. You want to be quite open and actually try and position the gaps as potential possibilities or opportunities. So try and put a positive spin on what could be seen as negatives, but in this case, you want to sell them as possibilities. Okay, so that's when you'd be able to open the door for asking for support and help. Remember, that's what people are there. They're there to identify the next big thing. Of course they are, and they might be looking to invest, but fundamentally they're there to help you make that a reality. So we try and get your gaps across in that positive light as possibilities, articulate them as clearly as you've articulated the strengths, and then that will put you in a really strong position and leave the audience with a really authentic view of who you are and what you're really passionate about. Okay?
Great. Yeah, so that call to action is important, right? Those guys are there to help you bring it to life, and you want to make it a call to action in terms of engaging with them in that way. And one of the ways to do that, believe it or not, is through numbers, right? So this will be an important part of your pitch. Numbers are everywhere, and most often not, they don't lie, right? If you're transparent about them. It's important that you don't overinflate your numbers, right? We've all watched Dragon's Den, and the guys go in and say, I'll give you 5% share of equity and I value my company at 10 billion, right? We've all seen it. It's nonsense. It doesn't come across as authentic, right? So you want to make sure your numbers are validated, right? That they are not overinflated, that they are realistic, that you've done your homework. And whether it's you're talking about margin or share or forecast, you want to make sure that those numbers are meaningful. And that ability to convert it into an emotion, into a call to action, can be really powerful. I want to introduce you to another expert, right? We've seen Simon. I'm going to introduce you to a guy called Chip Heath, right? Chip, as you'll see, is not your average presenter. He is a professor at the Stanford Graduate Business School, and he specialises in converting numbers in such a way as to use them as part of a kind of storytelling device, and how to convey really complex numerical concepts.
Demographics.
Sorry, one more second. He also has written a number of books. I've put one down here, Made to Stick, with his brother, and they're well worth reading if you get a chance to. So let's hear how Chip converts something complex into something accessible.
Show that wealth is highly skewed in this country. Research has found, and this is a typical result, that the top 1% have 31% of the resources. The top 10% control 70% of the resources. And the remaining bottom 50% of the distribution has basically 2%. Now that sounds pretty bad, but it's abstract and it uses fractions and percentages. And we know that people aren't very good at that kind of stuff. So let's map it onto another dimension that makes it concrete. Suppose there's an apartment building with 100 units on 10 stories. The distribution that I just described says that one person would own 31 of the apartments. The top 10 wealthiest people in the building own 70 of the apartments. And the 50 people who are poorest are crammed into 2 apartments down on the bottom floor. All of a sudden, that abstract economic distribution of wealth becomes very tangible and very emotion provoking. And I would suggest that framing is more likely to lead to action because of the emotion than the previous abstract framing.
So, I hope you agree that the way he pitched that was much more accessible. So just a couple of things. He didn't have lots of fancy slides, right? There was only a couple of slides there. It's determined to click on. He had a couple of slides there that meant you weren't reading what was on the screen, you were listening to what he has to say. He used that magic power of 3, right? You only had 3 data points for you to consider. Top 1, top 10, top 50%, sorry, bottom 50%, right? You only had 3 numbers there for you to consider. And he used great data visualization to bring that to life. And it was an emotional call to action, right? How unfair is that? That one guy who's rattling around in 31 apartments up there right? While the 50 poorest people are crammed into the 2 apartments at the bottom. It makes you kind of angry, and I want to do something about that distribution of wealth, right? So it's great in terms of eliciting that call to action. So he's definitely worth checking out as Chip. You want to talk about that power of 3, John?
Yeah, sure. So we touched on it in the last slide there, but I mean, it's fairly straightforward. But the brains and lots of research into our brains have recognised that the power of 3 is something the brain has resonance with. So whether it's call to actions and road safety campaigns, whether it's stop, look, listen, all of these campaigns all leverage that synergy with the power of 3 and that natural rhythm that we've got. So leverage that in your pitch. It's really as simple as that. You could leverage it in bringing to life who you are or what your technology is, or you could try and leverage it to actually do the whole story. So what's the problem you're trying to solve? How does your technology solve it better than others, and how are you going to scale it? Think about all the ways you can use it, because the audience that you're facing is likely to be listening to a lot of pitches. So Rafi, you're going to be listening to a lot of pitches in 2 weeks. And so anything that can make you stand out is going to, from the crowd is really going to help. And the power of 3 can be key to unlocking that. Okay, so we're going to continue on to what's the ask. And there's really 2 parts to this, but I'm going to be very quick on the first part. So the first thing I want to point out is, when I have been listening to pitches, quite often the simple instructions about what you would like people to pitch are missed. And every time it happens, it's a bit of a disaster. But so make sure you read the exam question, right? So if you've been asked to pitch for a specific thing, make sure that's what you open with, and reassure the audience that you've understood that. Rather than just telling your whole story and how you got there with the technology, if there's a specific ask, make sure you start and you lead with that and stay focused on that and conclude with that, okay? Because that can really lose the audience if you're off message. But the main part of this really is actually think about what you're doing there. You're there because you want help, or you want to be part of a program that could lead to funding and help you on your roadmap. So this is your opportunity to ask for specific things. So don't miss that chance. So if it's a program, if it's a corporate program like ours, for example, what sort of resources will I get access to? How long is the program going to take? When it comes to funding, how much is available? How long is that funding going to be available? Make sure they properly thought about the commitment that they need to give, and challenge them on that a little bit and try and find out whether I almost assess them for is this worth your time? Your time's precious. So ask all those key questions and make you clear that you're going to get something from being part of the program. And don't leave anything unsaid. You might be, not wanting to push things too hard, but trust me, it's better for these challenging questions to come out at that stage, and then you can really evaluate whether this program is for you. Okay, that's me. Okay, so I'll continue on. So I think in 2 weeks or a week's time, you're going to move into finance, right? 2 weeks time.
Next week.
So basically, this is just a slight snapshot, but I want to link it to that last piece. Before you start on the pitching journey, make sure you've thought about where you're going to go next, because it's all very well raising funds or being successful with the pitch, but you need to know that it's going to lead to more pitching and more need for fundraising. So what you want to be clear on is how you're going to navigate all these stages, because a lot of companies fail by raising funds and then actually don't have a plan to then go on to the next stage of fundraising. Just won't steal the thunder of next week too much, but just be aware that there are a couple of pitfalls that are called valleys of death and referred to as first of a kind pitfalls and all the rest of it. But that's what they mean. There's each time you raise funds, there's going to be you're going to have to get through a period of time to the opportunity that you have, the next opportunity to raise funds. So be aware of that. And actually, when it comes to planning, this is a tenuous but segue into the next part, which is thinking about the details. So we'll talk about the situation in place now. I think.
All right.
Got that right? Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So for the most part, your presentation, your pitch is going to be planned. You're going to know where and when you're going to have the chance to pitch, right? I'm sure you know what the plans are for 2 weeks' time, right? And that allows you to knock out some of those unknowns and help you feel more comfortable. So for today, for example, we had a number of phone calls with Rafi. He showed photographs of what the layout was going to look like, talked through what it was going to be like, how we were going to be mic'd up, how we were going to present, etc. And that was great because it takes out some of those uncomfortable unknowns and helps you feel more confident in terms of your delivery. So that's great, knowing about the place and the time. Now, 2 weeks' time is just 90 seconds, right? It's just 90 seconds, which is both a good and a bad thing. It's just 90 seconds of your life, right? But it's just 90 seconds to convey that passion, that enthusiasm, that idea, all the things we've talked about, cramming all of that in. In some instances, you might get more chance to do that, right? You might get an extended pitch kind of time. And the tools and techniques we're talking about today are equally applicable, whether it's 90 seconds or 30 minutes that you've got, right? Make sure that you use that time appropriately. I mean, imagine getting into a 30-minute pitch and presenting for 90 seconds, right? And blowing at all of that extra opportunity you have. So make sure you know the place, the time, and be prepared to tailor your pitch length accordingly. It'll also mean that you can think about, if you have the opportunity to bring samples or prototypes, or as a PowerPoint, can I bring visuals to life? All of those things, knowing the details of the logistics, the place and the time will really help. It will also help if you have various cuts of your pitch ready to go any one opportunity. So for example, as we were prepping for today, this appeared in Richard Branson's feed, where he was wandering through New York City on his way to lunch or whatever, and this woman came screeching up beside him on her bicycle, really enthused that she had spotted Richard Branson and pitched her business idea to him right there, right then on the sidewalk, right? You don't know when those opportunities are going to arise, right? That elevator statement is very true. When somebody just happens to turn to you and say, hold the elevator for me, and the guy who gets in is the very person that you want to talk to and get their support, the opportunity is right there for the taking. Make sure that you're ready for it in terms of having the crib notes for your idea right there in your back pocket and take that opportunity. All right, that's it. That's the Say Snap model. Hopefully, as I said, by the time you've said Snap, you'll have secured that funding, right? Think about how you engage your audience in terms of that storytelling journey, how you think about the type of audience, right? And therefore tailor your pitch accordingly. You think about how you want to convey who you are beyond just the idea, that passion, that drive, that intellect, that understanding of the route to market, etc. How you showcase the strength and acknowledge I've still got gaps up there, opportunities, as John said. Knowing your numbers and making sure your audience know that you know your numbers and that they are robust and validated. And being clear in terms of the ask, and the ask not just for today, but for that journey ahead as well. And finally, thinking about the place and time and tailoring your pitch according to both of those. All right, that is the model. Now comes the exciting bit. We're going to set up for a panel discussion with 5 great panelists. I really want to make sure that this is interactive. So make sure that you've downloaded the QR code, that you're ready to share your questions. And we will try and get through a few of those as we go. As we set up for that, we're going to roll VT, as they say. John, you want to introduce what we're looking at?
Yeah, so we've mentioned storytelling quite a lot today, and the video that we're big fans of is unashamedly a plug for one of our brands, Johnny Walker, but it's a great example of storytelling. And the other thing I would say to you is this story that the actor is telling is about Johnny Walker, and John Walker started off just like you guys. You know, he had an idea. He came out of farming, went into the grocery business, and then he had an idea for a brand, and that brand became Johnny Walker. So it should be inspiration that your idea can actually lead to worldwide renowned brands in the future. So take heart from that.
Yeah, and I'd also say, see the journey in terms of idea, route to market. How do I leverage people along the way to make my idea bigger, etc. You'll see all of those things come to life. So enjoy.
Shut it. Here's a true story about a young lad named John. Just a local farm boy, but with something special about the lad. A glint in his eye, a fire in his belly, a spring in his step. And one day, he went for a walk. Now this walk began when his father died. The year was 1819, and he was just 14 years old. Bereavement counselling. Well, these were the days when young boys were sent into the fields. The mills, the mines, tough times. But young John was smart enough to be lucky. His father's farm, where he was born and raised, was sold, and the proceeds used to open a grocer's. Big responsibility for the wee lad. His own shop in Kilmarnock, with his name on the door, John Walker, or Johnny, as the world now knows him. Back then, all grocers stocked a range of local single malts, but they could be a wee bit inconsistent. For John, that wasn't good enough. He began blending different malts together as a way of offering his customers a consistent, unique product. Now this backroom art quickly developed into a commercial proposition, and a very profitable one. And because there's nothing like a commercial proposition to stir the Scottish heart, it grew quickly into an industry filled with ambitious entrepreneur distillers. John thrived in this environment, and so too soon with his sons, Robert and Alexander, who joined him on his journey. The Walkers became the biggest name in a rapidly growing industry. They were unstoppable. In one bold bit of 19th century corporate raiding, they bought the famed distillery at Cardew, lock, stock and ensuring their supply of this silky single malt, and guaranteeing, more importantly, that none of the other big blenders could get their hands on it. But young Alexander wasn't content with being Scotland's biggest blender. Not ambitious enough for him, no. He convinced the ship's captains of Glasgow to act as agents for him, and drove the whisky bearing his father's name across the globe. By 1860, he had developed the square bottle. Now, with a label at an angle of precisely 24 degrees. No big deal, you might think, but you'd be wrong. The square bottle meant less breakages and more bottles per shipment. The diagonal label meant larger type, and together, that meant Johnny Walker had unmistakable presence on any shelf in the world. The bottle became an icon, and the rich liquid it contained sought after and consumed across the globe. Quite a character, Alexander Walker. Master of the blender's art. Ambitious, uncompromising, Mr. Walker. It was John's grandsons, George and Alexander II's turn to join him on his journey. They led the brand into the 20th century. By 1909, they had developed the iconic red label and black label, and persuaded Tom Brown, the best young illustrator of the day, to sketch a striding man in a napkin during a business lunch. In the stroke of a pen, the Victorian grocer was transformed into an Edwardian dandy. By 1920, Johnny's walk had taken him through 120 countries, and he continued walking through the brand's advertising over the next 50 years, into the fabric of global culture, deep into the dark hearts of several wars, to the pleasure palaces of the aristocracy, immortalised by screen legends, celebrated by filmmakers, singers, songwriters, novelists, shoulder to shoulder with the great sportsmen of the age, winning countless international awards for quality, and even being awarded the Royal Warrant by King George V. No going back after that. Not that going back would even have occurred to Johnny or any of his family. By the end of the 20th century, the familiar red label and black label were joined by the green label, the gold label, and the grandest of them all, Johnny Walker Blue Label. By the beginning of the 21st century, Johnny Walker wasn't just the world's biggest whiskey brand, but an international symbol of progress. The brand's keep walking mantra, adopted by pro-democracy protesters and parliamentary speechwriters. What would the farm-born Victorian grocer have thought of all of this? He'd have loved it. A Victorian farm-born grocer he might have been, but he and the family that followed him were possessed by a fiery ambition with the skill and intelligence to match. 200 years later, and Johnny Walker's still walking, and he's not showing any signs of stopping.
There you go.
I guess so.
That's a mic for you.
Thank you.
Don't share with anyone. And this is mic to share for everyone.
That's fine. Put on. Yep, great. Do you want to do introductions?
Siobhan. Siobhan.
It's like a firing squad here, isn't it? They'll get to eat pizza and you get to sit there and watch them.
To the campaign.
While we're setting up there, I hope you enjoyed that. I think it gets you right there. Right, Robert Carlyle did an incredible job of bringing the story of our founder to life. Right, and that's what he was. He was a founder. Right, and I'm sure you'd be
Leave the mic here.
amazed at where the business has got to 200 years since his birth. And one of the things is, it's pitched like a pro. Robert Carlyle did that in one take, right? All that speech, all the action with the props, etc. We're not expecting that 90 seconds worth in 2 weeks' time to be quite up to that kind of standard, right? But that's really how you pitch like a pro, right? Hats off to Robert. Okay, we're going into the real highlight of today, which is our panel discussion. We have 5 great panelists here with us today in terms of investors and entrepreneurs. Now, given you guys have got this 90-second brief in 2 weeks' time, we're giving these guys a similar brief. So, in 90 seconds or less, please introduce yourself and your role here today. And let's start with Max here.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Max. I'm the CEO of 42 Sensors. So who is Max? Well, I was one of those children that liked taking things to pieces. So much to the chagrin of my parents, I took things to bits and sometimes didn't really put them back together quite the way they should be. So my career, again, taking things to bits, putting them back together, I ended up being an engineer. So worked in Formula One for about 10 years and then went into aerospace for about another 5 years afterwards. At some point, I decided, well, the corporate world is not for me, and I wanted to go my own way. So my day job today is running a company, which makes sense, which solves people's problems. I work in the food and drink industry, partnered with Diageo, and together we are solving a $2 billion problem within the food and drink industry of productivity. Business has gone pretty well. I started it about 8 years ago, much like yourselves, with a PowerPoint, no money, and an idea to pitch. So I started with £12.50. My first pitch won me £5,000. And over the years, I've pitched to investors, to large investors, and then culminating in a pitch to 5,000 people live in the USA, televised to 5 million. Currently, the technology has been taken on by a $74 billion organization, licensed it a few months ago. So I have completed my journey of entrepreneurship. So why am I here? Well, I'm passionate about making things better. I've been in every single one of your chairs. I've been there where it started the company with nothing other than a great idea, and I'm here to help.
I wasn't planning on getting up. So hi everybody, my name's Nicola McMillan. So I lead the team in Scottish Enterprise, which is Scotland's economic development agency, and my sole role is to create companies. So not only for the Scottish Government and Scottish Enterprise, we put funding into projects that are at the pre-conception stage, but we're also investors and the first investor, and that's quite an important role for us because what we're looking to create is not just companies that are run-of-the-mill lifestyle type opportunities. We want to create companies that will have a genuine impact on the Scottish economy. And what does that mean? It means that you will employ, but more importantly, that you will have impact on a global stage. So I would say that that's one of the most important words for me as an investor that I want to see is what impact you as individuals and the products that you have, impact does that have? So 90% of my day is about teaching how to, bring out that impact and that ambition. We see probably, look at Christina for this, maybe about 150 opportunities in any given year. So we're quite well versed at taking that 150 opportunities right down to the top 5. How do we take them through a process, etc. And it very much has a process as a journey that you take, not just technologically, but also in that commercialisation mindset and taking yourself from the lab and into the real world, the pounds and pence real world. So that's 90% of what we do. The other 10% of what we do is give out the money. And those are the real kind of special opportunities that we know that are going to have that impact. So fingers crossed what you'll get from me today is, some of the hints and tips, etc., that we can impart on you. But my background as well, I was a scientist to trade. So again, I have been in your seats. I didn't have any good ideas. That's probably why I'm sitting in the seat that I am. I was also a really rubbish chemist. Week 2 of the PhD made me realise this is not for me. But talking was for me. I enjoyed talking about the science. And I think it's a real skill that you learn is how to actually translate that lesson about the science into that real world conversation that people off the street can understand what you do and why it's important. So I just want you to think about that when you're considering your pitches, and here to help after the pitches as well, or after the programme as well. Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name's Paul Wilson. I'm CEO of a company called Stack. So I have 32 years experience working in big tech internationally. So fortunately, I've worked in Silicon Valley, Taipei, Canada. I've been designing and manufacturing and running supply chains for companies like Dyson, BlackBerry, Apple, Sonos, Google. All of these huge companies, all international supply chains, all at scale. So I did that for 32 years. I lived outside of Scotland for 21 years. I spent 11 years in Canada. And I started, when I was looking to come home, get fixated on the problem of why is Scotland not scaling? So no matter where I went, there was Scots everywhere who were in executive positions, whether it be Silicon Valley or Canada or so on. So education, talent, innovation, research, I was convinced was as good as anywhere in the world, but we weren't achieving our potential. We weren't competitive. Evidently, we were acting almost as an incubator of research, IP, innovation, and then selling to typically US firms who were then exploiting it at scale. So that became the problem. What I saw in Waterloo, Ontario, where I lived for 11 years, is how they designed a system and a process and an accelerator program that took innovation, entrepreneurship, and got it really competitive against Silicon Valley. How did they do that? If you have less capital compared to Silicon Valley, you better build better companies. So the mentorship went deeper, it went longer. It resulted in an 18-month program that took, again, early stage entrepreneurship, innovation, and got it really competitive against Silicon Valley. So I saw that, I saw how effective it was. I brought it back to Scotland and started Stack in 2021. We are now 4 years into doing mentorship. We have a co-working space in Glasgow. We are now Scotland's newest investor. So we look for early stage tech companies, particularly if you're in smart and deep tech, that combination of computing, connectivity, data, which is all powered by AI these days. That's where we specialize. We mentor, we co-work, we now invest in companies, and critically, we're now connecting them to the market. So we have partnerships with Volvo and Sonos and another few giants where we forget about that lack of ambition. We just connect you to the corporates and we achieve scale and internationalization through that. So That's why I'm here, to encourage you to do more of that, to think big, to be bold, to take the leap. And if you do, come and check out Stack. We're looking for talent like you. Thank you.
Hello again, everyone. I'll try and keep this really brief because you already heard from me, but a couple of things I wanted to call out that I hadn't mentioned already. So first of all, my name is John Cant. I am currently working as the head of Diageo Sustainable Solutions. I've been with Diageo 27 years, which I don't think I gave away before, but across that time, I've been working mostly in supply chain roles, procurement and product development. But one thing Diageo is quite up on, which is great, is helping you discover your purpose. And what I've discovered over the years is that I'm really driven by delivering the change in the right way by people and organization. And that latterly has led to realizing that it's not just the organization that can benefit, but the planet as well. So by moving into my current role, which is head of Diageo Sustainable Solutions, which is all about driving the sustainability of the business, I realised that actually you can deliver change to improve profit, but also to help protect the planet as well. And that's a real sort of driver for me on a daily basis. But it also is really why I'm excited to be here as well, because you guys have got a chance to bring the next technologies to the world that can actually help drive profitability for the country, but also like to make the planet a better place. And I think that genuinely excites me. So I'm really looking forward to seeing and hearing what you can deliver. But the last sort of message I'd leave you with is, planet and profit is definitely possible. And I think there's a lot of there's a lot of chat at the moment about the planet not being important, but that's just, as far as I'm concerned, that's noise. I think what I've seen is there's a real integration of what is called ESG out there into how businesses and how investors choose investments. And so I think the world is ripe for sustainable technologies to be backed. And hopefully, Paul, you'll agree with that. So I really take heart from that, and don't let all the sort of noise and rhetoric that's out there put you off in your journey. Okay, thanks very much.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maggie Raikova, and I'm the founder of RappiSense. RappiSense is a pre-spin-out venture from the University of Strathclyde. And today I can actually give you a tiny pitch of my business and maybe give you an idea how you can actually pitch in terms of storytelling and the power of three that we mentioned earlier before. So milk contamination costs £190 million per year to UK and European dairy processors. Yet testing of milk still remains outdated, slow, and manual. So we at RappiSense are actually changing that. Our technology is an electrochemical biosensor technology, so it's a hardware, and will be fitted into milk transportation tankers, and will be detecting contaminants such as antibiotics earlier within the supply chain. By doing that inline, on-site, and automatically. So essentially, we are removing the human element out of the equation and really helping and boosting the confidence in milk producers and processors when it comes to milk supply. So I started this journey a year and a half ago now, so I'm actually quite earlier than compared to Max, for example, a bit further ahead than you. This RappiSense venture really started from my PhD research from the University of Strathclyde, and since then I managed to expand my team a little bit further beyond just the academic supervisors that I had, and it's been really challenging, really motivating. Pitching is still something that I'm quite new to, but I've done already a few pitches. You always have to tailor according to your audience. I try not to bring too much like technical, for example, elements today. But yeah, I'm hoping to bring a little bit perspective from academic spin-out with academic background, and perhaps shed a light on how we can actually compare pitching in business setting compared to academic conferences and just giving that academic and educational kind of content.
Thank you so much for those introductions. I'll start with a question that springs to mind. Maggie, listen to you speak there. When when you're pitching, and particularly you're trying to be you and be authentic and put yourself out there, and maybe Max, you can add on to this. How do you prepare yourself emotionally for that, right? In terms of putting yourself out there, what's the process that you go through? I'll ask Maggie and then maybe Max to follow up on that one.
Because pitching is quite new to me still, I'm always extremely nervous, if I have to be completely honest. Although I've done academic presentations before and I love the feeling after, and it's the same for pitching. Before I'm really, really nervous, but as soon as it's done, I just love the feeling, that adrenaline rush. So when I did my first pitch for RappiSense specifically, I went back to thinking how I felt after presenting in academic setting, and I just went back to that feeling and kind of like motivated myself to even do that in a more like newer world for me, with newer words, with newer terms, into the investment kind of world. Another good technique before that I do, it might sound silly, but breathing exercises, that really just calms you down. And this is just something that I always do before public speaking. It doesn't matter if it's a pitch or just presenting myself or my business. So yeah, I would say like a few simple things like that, going back to previous experiences, reading techniques. And always I find something really helpful as well is to find a person in the audience that is nodding, or at least agreeing or understanding what I'm trying to say, which is always giving me a bit of confidence that my message is actually going through within the audience.
Okay, great. And Max, if we can hear from you in terms of you're taking the same thing.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that I found quite difficult, especially in the early pitches, was the separation between the business and yourself. And in fact, one of the slides that was up earlier on, the investors are buying into yourself. So emotionally, it's quite easy to see that people are judging you for that pitch, for your own personality. That is true, but there has to be a separation from yourself on the business idea at all. So one of the common mistakes I made very, very early on was the fact I was standing up on the stage to be judged for who I was, but that's not the case, right? So you've got to be able to separate that out from the business. And actually the judging that's going on is about the business itself, and the pitch really is a 5-minute, in your case, 90 seconds introduction. So it's more like a calling card. And as you go through the process of investment, you'll see that the business element comes in. So the thing I found very, 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 very helpful from the get off was to understand I'm not being judged, but the business idea is. And actually, it's almost like the first date with an investor, right? So you are literally there for nothing more than a business card and an introduction to the idea. So you have to try and separate yourself out from the business element.
Thank you so much for that. We've got some questions coming in, Rafi.
Right, so I'm going to read out and pretend the anonymous person is me. So I'm building a sustainability platform for companies to focus on people readiness and engagement to drive change and policy working where available. Just because most sustainability initiatives without practical people involvement, even in corporate environments, fail. Most for-profit companies do not have sustainability as a profit-making aspect. Going across as a statement, apologies. How then I do convince them for my service and even pay for it? It is addressing the corporate aspect of it. I don't want to put John in the point. Would you kindly take
Yeah, I can
this?
start. Maybe if someone wants to back me up, feel free to jump in. I think one of the points I touched on in my intro was that the environmental social governance measures that investors and corporates alike have embedded within their operations has happened. So I genuinely believe that has happened. So if you've got a platform that is highlighting or concisely showing those sustainability measures in a way that's digestible, because one of the challenges with adding ESG into the equation is it's yet another set of KPIs, another set of metrics. So I guess my encouragement would be ESG is really important for investors, for companies alike. If your platform can really help that be digested and combined with existing KPIs, then that will sell. that will absolutely be desirable for a number of different audiences. So that would be my starting point. Hopefully that's at least goes some of the way to answering that question. And
perhaps from the founder's perspective, you can answer the second part of the question, which is how do we convince them to pay for my service and even pay for it? What do you guys often see that's like putting you off, like, nah?
I think that all comes back to actually what problem you're trying to address for that company. So you've come up with an idea where you've got a hypothesis that what you've got there is a problem to that particular business. What you need to then do at that point in time is work out the transactional economics of it. So what I mean by that is, what does that problem cost that business, and what does your solution save that business? And in a situation like this, there's also potentially legislative problems that you can solve for the business. So it's about finding your unique advantage, whether that be what it does, it saves manpower time, or actually there's a legislative policy shift that means that that company must comply to a certain thing, and you can do, as John says, it's an easily digestible data source that you can go to. It's about finding the pain point that exists and that your solution solves, and that's the bit where, as a funder, that's the bit that we need to see cemented, that there is the economics stack up to it. One of the things I would say about pilots, etc., and about proving then that you've got that solution that works is, don't ever give away anything for free. Always work out how you can actually get paid for the pilots as well. And, and kind of large corporates are often, up for that challenge as well and being part of the solution building process. So always bear that in mind. Try not to sell yourself short and give away anything for free in a pilot situation.
Great, thank you. I think we get a
This is directed to John and Paul. I'm sorry, John. So in your experience, how does the US political climate affect investors and startups focusing on optimizing electricity? Grid operations focused on renewable integration into grids. So it's a deep tech question, also touches the political anonymity / investment aspect.
Yeah, that's a great question for sure. The politics and the kind of changing priorities in the US is challenging for lots of people, including startup founders these days. I guess energy cost is one of the biggest costs that any business has anyway. So regardless of, whether the policy change or so on, if you can save any corporate, in their energy costs, you're really attractive to them. So some things you can control, some things you can't control, right? Trying to be, let's just say, too consumed by government policies, right? Try not to be. Try to focus on the things that you can go and change, right, and go and make a play at that. So, yeah, I don't know if that's the best answer, but yeah, energy, regardless of policy, is a huge cost.
Yeah. I think the only thing I'd add there is that the corporates will have their eyes on the policies, and by partnering with them, you can have an influence on that. So if you can help, again, coming back to that digestible piece, if you can help bring a technology that helps them get their point across, then that changes the nature of the conversation with regards to policy. So it might not have an outcome, but it's more likely to have an outcome if you can do that. So
thanks, John. So before I take the online question, any questions from the audience here? So I will take from Sam, and then I'll come back to you. Sam, can you be a bit louder?
Just to actually touch on what's on the screen, it's talking about how to stop your idea being stolen. I think recently, I don't know if it's just in here I'm in online, but I've seen a lot of people proposing new business models where coming up with ideas isn't sort of the key barrier anymore. Copying's becoming quite common, especially with like tech solutions and SaaS softwares and stuff. I don't know if you guys could share any insights into sort of your experience with that, especially in sort of startup spheres, and obviously the other questions like how to avoid it.
So I think Maggie did a great job of doing exactly what you're talking about there. So Maggie gave you an overview of her product, the problem that it solves, but Maggie didn't give anything away in terms of what the technology actually was. there was an overview of it. And in a pitch, it's very unlikely, if you're in a pitch like this, where it's investors that you're pitching to or whatever, that you're going to actually get any time to talk about actually the deep dive technology. It's about the thing that we're interested in at that point in time is what problem you solve, how much money it's going to make, or how much time it's going to save, and then the people economics of that. Where we get into the kind of the real deep dive of the technology is in due diligence phases. So don't worry about, talking generically about the product in a pitch scenario. That's what deeper discussions are about. And there are ways around about how you actually deliver that message without giving away your IP. And what Maggie did in that 90 seconds was a perfect example of how it should be done. The problem is the most important thing. You've got a solution to solve it. And actually, no one will know more about the product than you or Maggie. So that's the one thing as well to remember is that's all kind of in your head. We're kind of almost taking it for granted that you've kind of got, the secret sauce that sits behind that up there. So you can do it without giving away your technology IP.
So this kind of question or challenge or issue comes up quite a lot, right? So we operate in co-working spaces, we're doing pitch events, we're trying to influence, a limited number of investors and customers that they should take particular interest in you. If you listen too much to the IP lawyers, right, they will tell you to share the very minimum. Be careful you don't get paralyzed by that. I don't subscribe that there's a whole bunch of people sitting in every audience that's trying to listen and pick up ideas and try and steal ideas or IP and so on. Okay. So if you're working on something in quantum computing, right, for example, you don't need to go in and tell the secret sauce of the quantum computing, but like Nicholas says, you just need to give enough to make whatever audience is convinced that you've got something where the bar is high, it's unique, hard to replicate, right? And again, share enough to get them on the hook with that. But again, no need to go too deep into that. Okay.
Just when I was thinking here, I was on a kind of pitch session yesterday. There's a tendency with academics that because it's your baby, you've been in the deep research of this, there's a tendency that that's what you want to talk about. And I think what you're needing to kind of shift in your head is very much a mindset shift. You're coming away from that kind of academic lifestyle and it's a commercial conversation that you're having. So it's a very different conversation. But there is a tendency, and I understand it. As I said, I was in your shoes and kind of I wanted to talk about the tech, the science, the cool stuff. That's the bit I was interested in. But if you're wanting to be a founder, it's a different conversation that you have. So just be mindful of that.
Thank you, Nicola. So should we go to another question?
So I just had one question since we were on sustainability. Do you see carbon credit trading, carbon credit purchase from other countries where it's available in abundance like Africa, India and other countries? Do you see that becoming a big area in future?
Okay, so yeah, I think the short answer is yes. But I think different corporates have different views of where that's going to be useful as well. So it's about making sure you read and understand and you do your homework on that. So there's lots of things where I think carbon credits can be really helpful. I think they're particularly helpful in emerging economies and giving additional revenue streams to smallholder farmers, etc. But equally, there'll be limitations and constraints that the carbon market bring. So even when they're become a bit more regulated, there will still be restrictions. So it won't be a silver bullet. I don't think, that's my personal view, but it will play a role, and carbon markets will play a role. You're starting to see a shift away from people buying, just the cheapest credits, and you're starting to see a higher quality of credit coming through. I think the more of that happens, the more impact that the credits will have. So I think that's got to be good for the whole sector as a whole. Hopefully that helps. Yeah.
Thank you, John.
I have a question I was thinking about in terms of maybe for Max and Maggie, and we were talking about like 2 weeks' time, it's a 90-second pitch, but we talked about the model being equally applicable, whether it's 90 seconds or 30 minutes you've got to pitch. I just wanted to ask about your experience as entrepreneurs in terms of different types of pitch and how you prepare for one versus another.
Thanks. So when I first started the company, I got involved with an incubator, and it was quite possibly the most horrendous experience I've ever had. And this was run by a well-known bank. So it's horrendous in terms of the embarrassment factor that these guys made me do. So I joke not, there was a weekly text message that came out and said, right, I want you to film your 90-second pitch on a bus, and it needs to be submitted tomorrow. So my week was literally filled with a text message from a random stranger saying, I want you to pitch 90 seconds in a really awkward space, right? And so the first couple of times on my video, and this thing's shaking and just absolutely having a horrible time with it. And after about a week of doing this, it became so boring and a chore. And actually, the thing that I found probably the most important thing is just this repetition, knowing what you're going to say and doing it over and over and over again. And you get to the point where you just don't care, right? And absolutely don't care. But there's a very, very interesting element of it. So there's a difference between a 90-second pitch and also a half-an-hour pitch. And a 90-second pitch is pretty much about the why and the story and the solution and nothing else. It's literally an instant, what am I doing? What's the numbers and what am I solving? And then as you get kind of a bit further into the pitching element of it, and it kind of traces from a friends and family to a large Series A, the detail that goes into, say, a Series A round is much more in depth and actually starting to rely on the items for due diligence that they're going to be more interested in. So how credible is the business? But for where you guys are today, I cannot recommend enough, as crazy as it sounds, taking your mobile phone out and just filming yourself for 90 seconds and doing that 10 times. And I guarantee the first one, you'll feel so awkward. It'll be absolutely horrible experience. But by the 10th one, you won't care. And it will just be automatic. But please, if there's anything you can take away from today, get a mobile phone and just film yourself doing 90 seconds pitch.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Practice makes perfect. I've done 60 seconds pitches. I've done 10 minutes, longer than that as well. I always have a spine of basically my whole business plan, and always starts with the problem, solution, market, and all of those things that you would have in a pitch. And then I would have like loads in each section, but then I would just tailor and just pick the most important for each length of each pitch that I do. And as Max said, like if the pitch is very short, then you absolutely have to focus on the problem, mention your solution, and then how you can actually scale up. The ask is very important as well at the end. You always have to tailor that according to your pitch and audience. We actually had a very similar kind of experience during Converge. So it was a training for 60 seconds pitch, and they filmed us in front of everybody in the room. They filmed us pitching. So the first one was always terrible. Everybody did a terrible, terrible job. But towards the end, when they filmed after 5 or 6 times that we practiced the pitch, everybody was almost brilliant. And when it's a 60 seconds, 90 seconds pitch, don't try to put all the information in those 60 seconds or 90 seconds. Really just pick the key message and just send that across with your story altogether.
I'll add one thing. The team that I lead are all media trained. Things that we practice is from yourself. First of all, watch it. Don't watch it, only listen to the sound. Listen to your voice, listen to the message. And then try it the other way around and only look at the visuals, right? And then try and play it back double speed. Because things that you don't pick up at normal speed, you will pick up at double speed. It's well worth doing that in terms of separating the two and how you come across, particularly if it's going to be like in filmed picture. Nicola, there's a question that's come in for you. Or that mic just for a second. Well, I'm busy. Which is, if the cost of a problem to a company isn't public knowledge when pitching, and you're trying to pitch how much money they could save, how do you get the information? What's the best way to approach that?
Fingers crossed I can answer this. This was my job for a long number of years, was around about that market validation and how you actually go about getting the voice of the customer and actually kind of then working out then economically, the transactional economics about what the argument is for buying your product. The one thing I would say is if you think that you've got something, you need to start with a hypothesis. So what do you think is the problem that you're solving? And then the next thing that you need to do is talk to people. And it might not be the company that you think you're ultimately going to sell your product into, but you need to talk to as many people as possible to validate that you've actually got something that's valuable. So, and how you do that is about asking the right questions. And it's a talent. On AI, ask AI how to do that. What are the right questions that you should be asking people? Because quite often what you're needing to do there is actually build a relationship with a potential customer. They're not going to give you that answer on day one, but what they're going to give you is potentially time, because what you've said is, I think you've got a problem. And generally when you speak to people, they'll kind of tend to agree. Remember, you're only speaking to people here, and people kind of offer a lot of their time, whether that be at trade shows, whether it be events that you can attend. But you need to start off small, but making sure it's the right questions that you're asking. And that really is the talent forum. They're not going to give away all the kind of numbers, etc., that it's associated with. And it might not always be about numbers. That's the thing as well. So I can give you an example of one of the kind of companies that I worked for, and it was a medical device company, and it was a new type of hip joint. It wasn't a metal hip joint, it was a polymer. So it was completely see-through, less infection. So the hypothesis was this is going to be used by the NHS because actually it reduces infection, reduces the amount of time spent in hospital. So the health economics starts to stack up. What we forgot to do in that business was actually ask the people who were going to use the technology, the surgeons. And I went to a medical device, an orthopaedic surgeon conference in London, and spoke to some of the best surgeons in the country. And every single one of them said, I wouldn't use it. And I said, but the health economics are there, it's going to save the NHS X, Y, and Z. And he said, when I'm in the field of the operation and I cut open to put that hip joint in, I need to be able to see where it's going. And the way that I can see that is because it's metal, it reflects off the light. If that's a polymer in there and I need to do something to it, I can't see it. So the one thing that you need to remember is all angles of your value proposition and testing it with every type of customer and not forgetting the people who are actually going to use it. So it's about testing your hypothesis with as many people as you can and then refining that down into your beachhead market. And what you'll get then is a sense of the data that you can then multiply up by, the available market that's there for you. So this is an art forum. This is what I would sit down and actually start to study, is voice of the customer activity and how you ask the right questions. There's people there to help you do it. It's not natural, and I appreciate that, but this is the one part of this whole entrepreneurship gig that can be taught. I don't know whether you would maybe agree with that, Maggie, in terms of, of how to find out your numbers. And Paul, if there's anything else to add.
Be persistent. So there will be someone who has the answer to the question that you need out there. You got to find them. You got to go after them. You got to hunt them down. You don't stalk them, but hunt them down. Get on LinkedIn. Find out who's connected to the people that you need to connect with, and how you can reach out, and how you can get a friend to make a warm introduction and have that, informal chat and ask the questions. It's work. It's something you got to do daily, weekly. Always carve out a bit of your time. Some people focus on product and they invest all their time in product. But what Nico's telling you is the massive part of building a business and being an entrepreneur. So spend just as much time finding the market, talking to the market, listening as much as possible. And that doesn't come easy. So work hard at that.
So there's a very, very important piece about asking the right question, but there's another important piece that I found really interesting is, who do you ask? So if you've got a pen and piece of paper, write down the mum test. It's a book on exactly this. It's about validating your marketplace. Simple theory goes like this, right? So if you go and talk to your mum and say, hey mum, I've got a great idea, I want to start a business, she's going to say, that's a great idea. And likewise, if you go and ask your friends and say, I've got a great idea for a business, you go and talk to your friends, they're all going to tell you it's a brilliant idea. So actually the people you want to be talking to are the people who tell you it's a terrible idea. And then you start to refine the products and the offering to address some of these things. And especially when you're starting off, those conversations are very, very difficult because, again, it goes back to this thing about criticizing yourself and not the business. But trust me, that is the most important information you can get from the marketplace, is the people who don't want to buy it.
Great. I think we have maybe time for one last question, Rafi.
Yeah. So could you share the most memorable why now you have heard and what made it stand out? Thank you.
Go.
Hi, so from the open innovation that you actually run, so what is the one thing that you heard the most memorable why now?
Well, I'm actually going to tell you about a pitch I didn't hear. It was someone heard 2 years ago I was with last week, and he pointed to a stall where the pitcher was standing, and he said, that guy was the most memorable pitch. And then he told me about it. So it's even secondhand, but I'll now remember it. This guy was selling an AI technology that could look at trash, a pile of metal, and it could do the analysis live to put a value on a heap of metal, basically. And in his pitch, he said, here's a picture of a heap of metal, and that's the guy who was selling it. And he explained that he went up to the guy and said, what's your problem? Why are you stuck with this pile of metal? And he said, I can't find anyone to give him $1 million for it. And he said, well, I've run my analysis on it. I'll give you one. And he gave him $1 million, and 2 weeks later, he sold it for $4 million. Okay. So that's it. That's the pitch. Everything you want to know about that technology is in that little anecdote. And for it to be sitting and still live and meaningful 2 years after the event, and now it's been passed on to me, that was obviously a good pitch, right? And the company's gone on to do really well. And the technology is continually to given that insight to customers alike now. So yeah, that's probably my example. I could tell you lots about bad pitches as well, so you can come and speak to you about that afterwards.
Yeah, there's actually 3. I hear tons of pitches these days, but there's 3 that stands out. One young entrepreneur, dad had Parkinson, and she was solving the bedridden pressure ulcer problem for millions, right? And that was it, right? I'm going to solve that. I'm going to create this soft robotic bed, and there'll be no more pressure ulcers. Incredible, right? Second one was period products for young women who wanted to enjoy the outdoors. I'm in the deep tech business, but that just blew me away how obvious that was. As a father of a young woman, I never even thought about it too much as she was growing up. But that was the second one. Then the third one is quite recent, and it's photonic computing that's solving the energy consumption for AI-enabled data centers. Incredible. 3 women thinking about real problems, right, that were so obvious that they could solve.
Great. Thank you so much, right? I'm sure we could spend all day quizzing you guys, right, and getting all your experience. But thank you so much to each of our panelists for being here today and sharing their wisdom so openly with us. So let's just thank you all in the traditional way. Thank you so much for having us here today. I've thoroughly enjoyed being part of your Global Innovation Programme. I wish you all the very best of luck for your pitch in a couple of weeks' time. John and I will make an effort to join the WhatsApp group, and feel free to post those questions. You've persuaded me to go do that, and I wish you very best of luck for that pitch. I'll hand over to Rafi to talk about next week.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you, Ona, and thank you to all the panelists. I was curious to answer a few questions, but you're not here to listen to me. You're here to hear from the panelists. But one thing I'll leave you guys with: execution, and then asking right question to right people. But often, like what Max said, ask the wrong people, you may get more wisdom. So with that being said, ask more questions and engage. If at all, one thing you're going to get out of this: engagement and co-founders, connections and networks. Often that will help you at some point when you're building something, not necessarily now, but later. With that being said, I will see you next week for Business and IP Essential Workshop, which is key. That is the penultimate workshop. Thank you once again. We managed to finish off sharply at 2. Thank you.
hanging about for a little while, so feel free to approach them and ask any questions that you have. Cheers.